I would now like to introduce you to Patrick Stoner, who is with PBS Flicks out of Philadelphia, and he will be your moderator today.
Well, thank you very much and welcome everybody. It's good to see you, Goran. First and foremost, Goran, let's set up where this is supposed to be taking place. Now, you shot in Serbia, but it's in Macedonian. It's 19th century Macedonia. Macedonia has a couple of names, so set up where it is in your definition of Macedonia exactly.
Well, the country that is now called Macedonia, at the time it was all kind of a hodgepodge between several empires. Well, actually the one, the Turkish one, the Ottoman Empire. But where we shot in Serbia is very close to the Macedonian border, so those regions are very closely united. And I mean, I speak Serbian because the language is also very similar, and that's kind of how it worked out. The geographical setting technically for the film is a fictional village at a spot close to where I grew up, which was about an hour and a half drive from the southern Serbian area where we ended up filming the movie.
And without giving any spoiler, but it is, of course, a most unusual film, I think we could say. It is in some ways a horror film. After all, we are dealing with witches. We are dealing with people who put amazing things in their bodies, who take amazing things out of their bodies, and who go into other bodies. So it would qualify as a horror film then, but it's really more than that. It's also an exploration of a patriarchal society that is not terribly pleasant, and what it would be like to be somebody who was not part of the power structure there, which is explored in many different ways, including gender and sexuality. Have I confused enough people listening to this without giving too much away? I hope so, Goran.
Yes, it's been my struggle.
Let's open it up to our group. I'll begin with Dan Tabor. Dan, do you have a question?
I do. So I love that the mundane is sort of transcends what it means to be human into the supernatural being who basically grew up in a cave and had no insight into humanity. What was that insight into that fascination with that sort of slice of life narrative that sort of drove this story?
Absolutely. I think essentially my idea for making the movie was, based on the historical pattern of women who were accused of witchcraft were always accused of taking the shape of another human being or an animal. And I thought, well, if you could do that, what an amazing perspective to look at people, even time, if you're able to just shift between bodies. But if we just took that and kept the rest of the world as it is, was my approach. What would that feel like? What would that be like? And then the slice of life aspect was, I was using this premise kind of as a way into this way of life, kind of that agrarian cyclical way of life that sort of defined not just that part of Europe, but most of Europe, I think a lot of the world really, for thousands of years, I wouldn't even say centuries, and is now pretty much dying out or on the verge of dying out. The specific village where we filmed now only has like about 40 residents, and none of them under 65, and that's quite common across that whole region. There are villages that are quite preserved and they're slowly dying out and there's no one staying in them. So it's just the final, glimmers of this way of life that existed for thousands of years. And I wanted to kind of document that and just what the day-to-day life reality would be. And then, obviously it's punctuated by major events in the character's life, but I'm always drawn to finding that kind of beauty in the mundane, in the everyday that you don't notice that way otherwise. So that was kind of the overarching principle in terms of working.
First of all, thanks for meeting with us. I think it's a really intimate, primal, and creative film. But I just had a little thing with the production notes seem to differ from what I got from the beginning scene between the witch and Navina's mother. Because it seemed like she promised the child to her, but the witch intended to just sacrifice the child. And then the mother talked her into sparing her life and convincing her that Navina could become a companion to her in 16 years. But the production notes say an embittered witch whose tragic story has terrified children for 200 years, Maria yearns for a daughter to keep her company. So I was kind of wondering about that difference. And did you have a backstory in your head as to why Navina's mother was in this position in the first place to have to give her child over?
Okay, right. I think Maria has an unconscious yearning. I wouldn't have put that in the production notes. To me and to Anna Maria, I remember it was very much, the decision was more like a whim, and we didn't want to over psychologize it. It was the reason Maria accepts the proposal is in the moment and instinctive, because it does speak to a deep-seated need for her to connect to someone, to have company in life that she doesn't even acknowledge to herself. And in terms of, but even she doesn't know it, and certainly I don't expect the viewer to be aware of it at that point of the film. And then I think as the story deepens and you realize there is something in her, I think that wants to connect to someone but is incapable of it. And I feel like it retroactively might give you the sense that she was looking for a connection unconsciously. At least that's what it is for me, but I feel like a viewer's version of the movie is more valid than mine is, frankly. So I'll wait to find out. And in terms of the mother's position, I think it's just as the mother says, your old maid Maria and injustice was done to you under this very roof. So the story of Maria that the viewer finds out later in the film is already common knowledge. The small village is tightly bound together, so they know that she was once, spoiler territory. She was once in a position that might imply that she wants to have a child of her own. And the mother is just in a desperate situation and instinctively going, what might she want? What can I negotiate in this particular situation? So that's kind of the mental stream of consciousness, the thought process that I think is happening with her that leads her to do the things she does in the opening scene.
This is a beautiful film, which is a strange thing to say when so many not so beautiful things are happening within it. But you might want to mention something about the cinematography before we go.
Well, again, speaking of symbiotic relationships as I was before, I mean, I'm not the only auteur on the movie. I would call Matthew Truong, the cinematographer, a fellow auteur, also Bethany Ryan, the production designer, and Christina Seaton, the producer. We're kind of working together holistically. Kind of the whole film was our department. It wasn't just our individual departments. And yeah, the cinematography kind of came about, and the style of it came about from us spending 24/7 for about 8 weeks before the shoot started. And then definitely during the shoot, spending a lot of time together and sort of, I'm very picky about frames and kind of patterns of movement, but the light and the way that light is used and the reliance, even to an extent I didn't realize how much of it was just going to be natural and available light. That was definitely Matty C's idea, Matty Truong's, the cinematographer's. And yeah, the priority was always to give the actors a 360-degree space to work within. And often they were kind of guiding where we would be going. And then Matty using his instinct of where the light is in relation to them, kind of setting stuff up, but always prioritizing keeping a connection to them.
Goran, there's just a little bit over a minute. They've asked me to wrap this up, so I'm going to let you take us out. But just Sundance, a marvelous experience. Want to give us your emotional reaction for your first feature film? How are you feeling about it?
It was a very disembodied experience, appropriately for this film. I mean, obviously, the in-person part was canceled, so I was just in my house. I was actually editing my second film, literally 12 hours a day, all through that process. So Sundance for me was just like coming out of this edit and then realizing, oh my God, I'm doing a Q&A and my film is playing at Sundance, and just sort of, it was hard to process. I'm still processing it. And then it happened for all. I was there a few years ago with a short film, so it kind of felt like an extension of that experience in some ways. And even that was quite dreamlike at the time. So it was just strange and wonderful. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Goran, and thank you to the panel. I wish we could have given you much more time to ask questions. They were all very intelligent, worthwhile questions. And we wish you well. This is an art house film that is going to surprise people if they haven't seen the trailer. And it's also an important film in that it deals with some very substantive issues that we haven't gotten into because they would have involved spoilers. But they are there, and we advise all of the people thinking of going to see it to expect them. And you'll be coming away with what I think Goran wants you to come away with. Thank you all very much. I'm Patrick Stoner.